It's fun, it's different. This one's a little bit more of a deconstruction of a romance, and it's also a bit of a mystery, but it's still got what the last one had as well. It's got a lot of comedy, it's got a lot of adventure. I think he's pretty two-dimensional, even though it's a 3D animation. He's pretty 2D. It's all or nothing. He's very in love with her, and he's very into this. He's very not into that. He's very not into Sherlock Gnomes. If he likes something, he loves it. If he doesn't like something, he hates it. If he makes a decision, he acts on it immediately. And because of that, there's always a lot of mistakes. There's always a lot to learn with Gnomeo, so he's always developing, and that's an interesting thing. You don't want to be playing a character who's static and not really evolving. Alright, so we find our gnomes this time round having moved from Stratford-upon-Avon to London. A whole new garden, but a whole new backdrop and a whole new city to go and explore as well. And a whole new set of responsibilities for Gnomeo and Juliet. They have sort of taken on the mantle of sort of leaders or garden managers, and it's their responsibility to make sure that it's tended well and that their home is kept well, and they've got to lead the way, really. So they can't just be in love, and they can't just be running about like gnome ninjas and having a great laugh and doing whatever gnomes do when they're not at work. They've got to have a job, basically. They've got to be a bit more grown up, and that sort of rankles with them in certain ways, and Gnomeo's not quite into that. And while Juliet is into that, she even feels the pressure and the tug and the pull of trying to maintain a relationship with Gnomeo, and at the same time trying to, get her job done. They realise that their entire gnome kind, both the blue gnomes and the red gnomes, have been taken, have been kidnapped. And at this choice moment, Sherlock Gnomes and Watson appear. And together they set off on a sort of mission and adventure, if you like, to go and find out where they are and get them back and find out who took them away. And that's kind of the story so far. But there's some massive revelations, and not everybody is what they seem. We've got our gnome versions of Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock Gnomes, and John Watson. And they are an interesting, odd couple, as I think Sherlock Holmes and Watson always have been. Sherlock Gnomes and our Watson definitely are. Sherlock is a sort of perplexing, at times obtuse, seemingly silly sometimes, but ultimately very clever character. And Watson is a guy who seems utterly devoted and in not in awe, but definitely in the shadow of Sherlock. But they definitely seem to know what they're doing in some ways, even though Gnomeo isn't too keen on Sherlock and thinks he's a bit of a show-off and a bit of a big head. I think it was important to take Gnomeo and Juliet out of their own garden in this movie to increase the scope and expand the scope of their adventure that they could have. I think the film, in some ways, for those two anyway, is about the outside world becoming that much larger and that much more difficult and complicated to deal with. For what was a very innocent and young love. And so I think that the environment around them is reflecting that by becoming larger and more complicated and more loud and noisy and dirty and foggy and smelly and magical and amazing and attractive and exciting, but definitely much more explosive as well. So it's I think it's having that physical landscape represent what's happening in the emotional landscape as well. Every animated film is as different as every live-action film. So they're all different. Your freedoms are different sometimes. I remember doing one animated film where I had to observe every single comma and full stop and get every single word right. And then every other animated films where it's been much more like, can you just make stuff up on the day, do you know what I mean? And do it once as it's written, and then we'll just have fun and improvise the rest of the time. So they're all very, very different. This one was a nice mixture of both. We really tried to nail what was on the page, and they still let me kind of go off and have a laugh every now and again as well. Energy, originality, a very specific character, which is, Elton's music is so unique and so of himself, and really doesn't sound like anybody else's stuff. And there's not a lot of artists out there like that, There's also a not sentimentality. There's a nostalgia, I think, to his music as well, because so many people have grown up with it. Even, I was only a kid in the 70s, but I was only born in the late 70s, but I've grown up with his music, so there's a comfort and a connection to his music that I think a lot of people have, from the adults, even to the kids, because there's adults, the mums and dads are playing his music all the time. So there's a lot of connection to, I don't know, that comfort and feeling with him, which is a great thing to have when you're making a kids film. And yeah, energy. There's masses of energy in his music. I think kids are going to like it because it's just really fun and it taps into what kids want to see. It's got lots of adventure. It's got a nice emotional pull, but it's not too complicated for kids to grasp onto. It's got a lot of humour, but I think the adults are going to enjoy it because it's a very well-made piece of comedy adventure drama, but also because they know when they're going to watch something like Sherlock Gnomes or Gnomeo and Juliet that it is going to be a proper kids film as well. I think they can expect some of the same that they got from the last movie, in that they'll get adventure and they'll get a bit of romance as well, and they'll get a lot of comedy. But what they get extra in this film is a more complicated world sort of forcing itself upon these two young lovers. And they also get a good dose of a kind of Sherlock Holmes-based gnome. And that's always fun to be around.